Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Midwest Prairie Summer Service Co-op for 2021. As our congregations begin planning to reopen in-person gatherings this fall after our long pandemic separation, we take this opportunity for a series of virtual visits with some of our neighboring UU churches over the summer weeks. Each Sunday, you are invited to experience inspirational messages from a variety of our ministers, together with music and other elements that make our communities special. We hope that this morning's service will engage your thoughts and lift your spirits, giving you courage to make a difference in the world and helping to strengthen the connections that sustain us all.
Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Lincoln on this Sunday morning, July 4th, 2021. My name is the Reverend Oscar Sinclair. This summer, along with congregations across Kansas, Nebraska, Iowa, and Missouri, we will gather online each week, reflecting on this central question. As we move into the next season of our lives together, how do we open up to the possibilities of what come next? Sunday morning, whether in person or on YouTube, we say at this church is a chance to proclaim who we are and what we are about, throwing open the doors of the congregation and proclaiming the radical love and welcome that is at the heart of our faith. The Unitarian Church of Lincoln aspires to be a loving community, uniting reason with spiritual exploration to transform ourselves and the world. And right now, as we move into this next phase of our lives together, we know that transformation is necessary. The poet and author Arundhati Roy wrote at the start of this pandemic over a year ago that historically pandemics have forced humans to break with the past and imagine their world anew. This one is no different. It is a portal, a gateway between one world and the next. We can choose to walk through it, dragging the carcasses of our prejudice and hatred, our avarice, our data banks and dead ideas, our dead rivers and smoky skies behind us. Or we can walk through lightly, with little luggage, ready to imagine another world and ready to fight for it. How do we open up to possibility? What other world do we imagine? How will we bring it into being? Step lightly and with little luggage, beloveds. There is still much work to be done. Let's be about it.
Today's chalice lighting is by Erica A. Hewitt, Until All Means All. The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized would neither be forgotten nor ignored because they are beloved and precious from the perspective of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence or government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they're anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we each light a chalice in our homes, may we make of our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all.
Feel the Our story today is called America, My Love, America, My Heart. It is written by Daria Peoples Riley. America the brave, America the bold, America to have, America to hold, America, my country. Do you love me? Do you love me from the inside out? Do you love me from the outside in? Do you love the way I speak? In English, yes. Spanish, no. And in my Creole? Do you love me fuerza, mo bate? The way my fists clench against my hips, the way my legs stretch strong. Do you love me historia, mo voyage? From shore to shore, east to west, south to north, from then to now, from there to here, where my glory rises in the belly of my soul, where I swing my halo to and fro, where I am loved, where I am whole. Do you love me when I raise my hand, my head, my voice, when I whisper, when I shout? Do you love me when I stand in, stand up, stand out? Do you love my yes? Do you love my no? When I shrug my shoulders, no sé, mo pa cone, I don't know. How long will it be? How long will it take? How long must I wait for you to love me from sea to shining sea? America, mi amor, America, moque. Do you love my black? Do you love my brown? Do you love my throne? Do you love my crown? Do you love my brave? Do you love my bold? Am I to have? Am I to hold? America, land of the free. America, 'tis of thee. America, I am you. America, you are me. And that is the end of our story.
These are the words of the poet and fellow Kentuckian Wendell Berry, titled The Wish to be Generous. All that I serve will die, all my delights, the flesh kindled from my flesh, garden and field, the silent lilies standing in the woods, the hill, the whole earth, all will burn in man's evil or dwindle in its own age. Let the world bring on me the sleep of darkness without stars, so I may know my little light taken from me into the seed of the beginning and the end, so I may bow to mystery and take my stand on the earth, like a tree in a field, passing without haste or regret toward what will be, my life a patient, willing descent into the grass. We are a people that shows up and takes our stand on this earth, as Wendell Berry says, like a tree in a field, without haste or regret toward what will be. We hope you join us in these endeavors.
My wish for all of us this summer is that we all find joy in the little things, the giggle of a child, a perfectly ripe ear of corn, the kindness of a stranger, or the way that the clouds float gently through the blue sky. It is these little things that make up happiness. Joy comes in sips, not gulps. Sharing sorrows can often be more difficult. The places that hurt us may be intensely personal. Sometimes we cannot yet speak of these things that are too personal or too raw, and yet love calls us on toward the healing that comes from knowing that we are held in the embrace of a universal love, and in the embrace of people here who cannot always heal what is hurting, but who will walk beside each of us as we move through the sorrow any one of us may carry right now. As we listen to this next hymn, please type or speak your name or the name of someone you would like us to hold in joy or in sorrow. Thank you for your presence.
Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe in, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love. When I breathe in, I'll breathe in peace. When I breathe out, I'll breathe out love.
What I Know of Country by Richard Blanco. Those picture books from grade school days, pilgrims in tall hats, their gold-buckled shoes I wanted so badly. White-wigged men standing tall in velvet-curtained rooms, holding feathers in their hands, inked words buzzing off the page into my heart's ear. Life, liberty, happiness for we, the people, singing of shining seas crossed, the spacious skies of a God-blessed land, when a song and a book were all I knew of country. I've forgotten the capital of Vermont and Iowa, but I remember my eyes on a map, mesmerized by faraway cities, towns I couldn't pronounce, or believe the vast body of this land belonged to me, and I to it. The Rockies' spine, blue stare of the Great Lakes, and the endless shoulders of coastlines, the curvy hips of harbors, rivers like my palm's lines, traced with wonder from beginning to end, the tiny red dot of my heart marking where I lived, when what I knew of country was only what I read from a map. I wanted to live in the house I dreamed from television, cushy sofas, crystal candy dishes, mothers who served perfectly roasted turkeys with instant stuffing, children with allowances and perfect teeth, fathers driving teal blue cars with silver fins to some country club I'd surely belong to someday. Though the gunfire, blood of war beamed into my bedroom, though I fell asleep, though our men from the moon landed on my roof with empty promises from space, fantasy was still all I could believe of country. I didn't want to change the channel, but I did. I lifted the shades, let light shine on the carpets stained with lies I'd missed, and saw the dust of secrets settled over the photos. The house began to creak, fall apart around me, alone for years waiting at the kitchen table, the last to know, asking my reflection in the windows, "How could you, America?" With no answer, for all I knew of country was my hurt and rage. But home was home. I dusted off the secrets, cleaned up the lies, nailed the creaky floors down, set a fire, and sat with history books I'd never opened, listened to songs I'd never played, pulled out the old map from a dark drawer, redrew it with more colors, less lines. I stoked the fire, burning on until finally, okay, nothing's perfect, I understood. I forgive you, I said, and forgiveness became my country. I stayed, you stayed, we stayed for our boys and girls returning as heroes, some without legs or arms, for our Challenger and towers fainting from the sky, or for the terrified lives of the Big Easy, stranded like flightless birds on roofs, for the sea that drowned our north, but we swept each grain of sand back to shore, for the candles we lit for our 20 children of Sandy Hook, feeling what we've always felt, to know a country takes all we know of love. Some days better than others, but never easy to keep our promise every morning of every year, of every century, and wake up, stumble downstairs with all our raging hope, sit down at the kitchen table again, still blurry-eyed, still tired, and say, listen, we need to talk.
This is a sermon on aspirations in 3 parts. I turned 18 in 2003, the year the United States, my country, invaded Iraq on what were at best shaky premises. I was part of a resolutely anti-war family, attending a UU church with a healthy peace ministry, and spent weekends that whole year protesting, and weekdays arguing about the impending war with many classmates who ended up serving in it. Now, it is hard to cast memory back that far, especially in the last 5 years of American political life, but 20 years ago, it was not popular in any party to be particularly anti-war. In the years after 9/11, patriotism, or the lack of it, became a kind of epithet. So you might imagine the complicated feelings that I brought to taking an oath 6 years later to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and to bear true faith and allegiance to the same. The years that I spent in the Peace Corps were formative for me, particularly given the context of 2003 and around this question. How might we as faithful people think about patriotism? After a young adulthood regarding any talk of patriotism or the symbolism of flags as deeply suspect, I could not deny that during my time in the Peace Corps, seeing a 4x4 with the stars and stripes on its side roll up or walking into the U.S. Embassy were comforting moments, and often a sign of help on the way for myself or the village where I lived. I know that the Peace Corps is more complicated than that, and parts of it are still caught up in colonial legacies that deserve interrogation. But the subjective experience for me was this: serving with other volunteers and professional staff working hard against deeply entrenched obstacles to make the world a little more humane, a little more connected, left me proud of the best that my country had to offer. But then we still have this tension. The country I was proud to serve in Lesotho was the same one at the same time dropping bombs on Afghanistan. The Baltimore that I came home to was a tight-knit community of resilience, and one where the police killed Freddie Gray and so many others. In this country, we can never fully untangle our history or culture from settler colonialism or white supremacy. So what, then, are we Unitarian Universalists to make of the 4th of July? This isn't an idle question. Here in Nebraska, some proposed health education standards have become a proxy fight for questions about how and what we are teaching our children. A leading candidate for governor brags on his website under the heading "End the Indoctrination of Our Kids" that his was the first gubernatorial ticket in the country to sign the 1776 pledge, which calls for the removal of the 1619 Project and critical race theory from curriculum in our schools. I've been in State Board of Education meetings this spring where the language was unequivocal. Either you condemn critical race theory or you are un-American. And so this is the question that I want to start to take up on July 4th of 2021. Because two things are deeply true to me. We live on a country built on horror. 1619, the year slavery was introduced to what is now the United States, is part of our founding story. The ongoing disenfranchisement and systemic oppression of BIPOC folks through systems of white supremacy and colonialism should be burned into our conscience, particularly for those of us who are white. And it is also true, to my experience, that I am genuinely moved by the aspirations of 1776. It means something to me that the Peace Corps oath was to the Constitution, not a person. It means something to me that I'm part of a civic project that goes back centuries, where part of the implicit civic faith that I learned as a child said, first, we can do big things together. And second, each generation has a responsibility to build on what comes before. So 1619 or 1776, I'm unconvinced that we have to choose. Unitarian Universalists have spent decades doing the hard theological work of critiquing and complicating simple binaries. So on this July 4th and in ones to come, I want to find a way to acknowledge injustice and to hold fast to the aspirations. Maybe that looks like Richard Blanco's description, that to know a country takes all we know of love. Some days better than others, but never easy to keep our promises every morning of every year of every century and wake up, stumble downstairs with all our raging hope, sit down at the kitchen table again, still blurry-eyed, still tired, and say, listen, we need to talk. When my daughter is old enough to ask about what she's learning in school, whatever these curriculum standards end up being, I want to tell her this complicated story. That she was born in a country founded on high ideals, and a country that must come to terms with the contradictions of its history. A country of great national beauty and a colonial project. And that's a lot to hold. Maybe too much for the Nebraska public school system right now. But I trust that our faith communities and my daughter can hold this complex truth. Of course, this is not simply a sermon about patriotism. Goodness knows there are some seminary professors who would haunt me if I stopped there. This story of tension between high aspiration and heart-rending history is not just the story of a country, it's also the story of the Unitarian Universalist Association. Last Sunday, the General Assembly of the UUA passed a statement of conscience titled Undoing White Supremacy, a Call to Prophetic Action. We have been considering this for years, and we finally passed it. Among the calls to greater justice in the world is this: that it includes not only engaging in action beyond the denomination to overcome the ways in which systemic white supremacy is woven into our group cultures, interpersonal relationships, and individual ingrained biases. The statement recognizes the history of our faith. That for as much as we have shown up in the community, as much as this is a faith that teaches a lot of youth and young adults, including me, how to show up and protest, we've fallen short of the promise of our faith. The contours of the racial reckoning nationally in the UUA have been the focus of plenty of sermons in this series and in others. But this story is also true of our individual congregations. Here in Lincoln, we celebrated our 150th anniversary last year. And in telling the story of the last 150 years, we did not shy away from the truth that one of our most prominent lay leaders in the early 20th century was one of the first female doctors in Nebraska and one of the foremost advocates of eugenics in this country. There are plenty of places where we, as a faith community, have fallen short of our aspirations. And even in the midst of this reckoning, there is great beauty. For me, this is the faith that gave me language for an expansive humanism. It's the writings of Hosea Ballou, Clarence Skinner, Arthur Weatherly, old white guys all, sure, but also part of the living tradition that we draw on every Sunday that we gather. So the story that I want to tell my daughter is that the faith that I spend my whole life serving is one where we get a lot wrong. But the reason that I stay is not that we get a lot wrong, but is that we can acknowledge that and commit to do better. The reason I stay is that in this place, we can hold multiple stories. But let's not stop there. Over the next 10 weeks, as part of this worship series, you'll hear from preachers and congregations across the Great Plains. As we move into this next season, as the pandemic and our response to it evolve and change, we decided to ask each other in planning this series, how do we open up to the possibilities of what comes next? Here's the truth that I hope is part of whatever comes next. Just as we've had tensions between our actions and aspirations in our denomination and our country, we have not always lived up to our aspirations during this pandemic. This is true at the Unitarian Church of Lincoln, but I imagine some of this applies to your communities as well. As we open to the possibilities of what comes next, we should start with what Victoria Safford says, the place of truth-telling about our own soul first and its condition. There are many things that I regret from the last 15 months. I know, speaking simply for myself, that I am going on vacation as soon as this sermon goes live, in part to breathe and get a little space from a version of me at the close of the congregational year that was exhausted, frustrated, and constantly worried that I would say something I would regret. Not out of intention, but just sheer fatigue. Because sometimes when we're tired and working on a project, we reach into the toolbox without thinking and come up with a hammer when what we needed was a screwdriver. Part of that fatigue, I think, is the other truth of this last year. That there have been moments plural, in the last few months when whatever decision we made, we would fall short of our aspirations, even our obligations to each other. In re-entering our building, do we prioritize the needs of our elders who in Lancaster County are nearly universally vaccinated and who have been bitterly isolated for over a year? Of course we should prioritize them. That's who we are as a community. Or do we prioritize the needs of young children and their parents who are not yet vaccinated and won't be for some time? Of course, we should prioritize them. This isn't simply a case of a decision where whatever happens, someone will be angry. Those are pretty common in church life. That's like a Thursday afternoon. But the decision of how to prioritize groups as we reopen is a decision where either way we went, we would fall short of our implicit covenant as a community to be a place of connection in a disconnected world and to be a vibrant intergenerational community. Sometimes, the great Jean-Luc Picard said, it is possible to commit no mistakes and still lose. That is not a weakness, that is life. And the truth is more complex than just that fatigue. Because for all the fatigue, for all the times we've fallen short of our aspirations as a community in the last year, There have been times where we have lived up to ideals. We've shown up for each other. We've created online communities, figured out how to make our worship more accessible, showed up for racial justice in deeper ways than we have before. This pandemic has brought out the best in us. And so when I tell my daughter the story of when she was 3 and we stayed home for a year, that will also be a complicated story of how we held to our aspirations and hopes even as we fell short in practice. Aspirations matter. Whether they are a community that proclaims itself to be multi-generational, a denomination that centers the work of anti-racism, or a country that has a holiday marking the self-evident truths of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Aspiration comes from Latin. It means more or less to breathe upon. And the image that I've had in my mind all week is of a coal at the bottom of a fire that has gone out. Maybe it's been rained on or just allowed to lay fallow for a while. Aspirations are what allow us, in the midst of moments in history where our flames are low, to blow on that flame, to blow on that coal and bring it to flame. To be in the aftermath of pandemic a multi-generational community, to be in the middle of a system of white supremacy, a denomination that commits itself to dismantling that system, to be embedded in history, a country of horrific history and hopeful future. If we allow them, aspirations call us to our best selves, not despite the failures of history, but in the midst of them. So, how do we open up about the possibilities of what comes next? First, let's be honest about what has been. But may we also find that coal, maybe buried in ash and dust, and blow on it together. Amen.